Welcome the anointed ones. Sometimes the protagonist enters the story so late it feels like a plot twist, but it was divine suspense all along. Let's be honest, for a while it looked like your name wasn't even on the call sheet. You were toiling in the shadows of self-doubt, wrestling with setbacks, while others with a fraction of your potential basked in the limelight, performing like their worth depended on fleeting applause. But here's the truth the world often tries to bury. Every legendary tale has a turning point, a moment when the authentic star arrives, irrevocably altering the narrative. Some of the most iconic roles in history were almost miscast until the destined actor stepped in and owned them. That's you, chosen one. You weren't late. You were being meticulously prepared. Now the spotlight isn't just searching. It's trembling with anticipation. The stage isn't just set. It's sanctified. The world isn't just watching, it's holding its breath. You're not about to make an entrance. You're about to commandeer the entire spectacle, costumes, audience, and critiques included. And don't worry, your detractors have ringside seats. Let them provide the refreshments. Buckle up, because this isn't just your moment. It's your ascendance. Let's delve into it. Number 1, you were the narrative curveball they never anticipated. You were the narrative curveball they never anticipated. That's the reality they struggled to accept. While they were dismissively writing you off, snickering in their self-assured circles and convincing themselves you were irrelevant, you were quietly morphing into the very force that would upend their entire storyline. They believed they had the script memorized. They saw themselves as the headliners, the ones holding all the cards. But here you stand, not just returning, but debuting a transformed self. And nothing could have equipped them for what you've become. They grew complacent in your perceived absence, dangerously comfortable. They mistook your silence for submission, your trials as your terminus, your delay as a decisive defeat. What they failed to grasp is that while they were flaunting temporary roles and manufactured confidence, you were being divinely shielded, refined, pruned of all that was extraneous, and imbued with an authentic power, something they lack, something you didn't even recognize blossoming within you until this very instant. And now that you're here, it's not just jarring. It's deeply unsettling, because everything they established, everything they proclaimed, every narrative they propagated crumbles the instant you speak, move, ascend, or even just enter the room. You didn't return seeking a seat at the table. You arrived as the table itself. You didn't come back to justify your existence. Your very presence is the irrefutable testament, and that's what stings the most. You never needed to plead your case to anyone. You simply needed to evolve. You weren't factored into their original blueprint, and that's precisely why your arrival is so disruptive. They constructed the scene without you, but now the plot hinges on you. The atmosphere rearranges itself around you. The very energy in the room crackles with your presence, because truth has an uncanny way of exposing every fabrication that sought to suppress it. And you are embodied truth. They didn't foresee that the one they overlooked, misjudged, or attempted to break would be the very catalyst that breathes life into the entire storyline. You are the narrative curveball, not through conscious effort, but because destiny authored you that way. And now that the curtain has risen, everyone is witnessing what Providence always knew. The authentic story didn't commence until you made your appearance. Number 2. You were cast as the underdog, but you were the orchestrator all along. You were cast as the underdog, but you were the orchestrator all along. They prematurely assigned you labels: introspective, eccentric, overly sensitive, inherently different. They confined you to roles they could manage, underestimated the vastness within you, and relentlessly handed you scripts that kept you confined. You were expected to comply, to remain in the periphery, to never question the structures that were inherently biased against you. But you weren't crafted for their scripts. You were designed to rewrite the entire saga. While they meticulously rehearsed lines to assimilate, you were absorbing life's lessons through adversity, loss, betrayal, and periods of introspection. While they studied the art of projecting power, you were learning to wield genuine influence without resorting to performance, and that's where the paradigm shifted. You weren't seeking to compete with their charade. You were evolving into the overarching narrative they never envisioned. They assumed you were merely enduring the background noise, when in actuality you were the architect of the tempest that would invert the entire scene. People presumed you were simply along for the ride, that your purpose was to bolster their achievements, applaud their illusions, and adhere to a risk-averse path. But you knew instinctively that you weren't destined to occupy the sidelines, yearning for scraps of validation. You were meticulously observing everything: the inflated egos, the calculated power dynamics, the deceptive masks. You witnessed how people behaved, how they spoke when they believed you possessed no voice, and how swiftly they dismissed you when you deviated from their established norms. And then imperceptibly your transformation unfolded quietly, powerfully, and autonomously. You relinquished their scripts and began composing your own, grounded in truth, not in seeking approval. You became the author of your forthcoming chapter, not the victim of their distorted portrayal of you. And now they're grappling with bewilderment because the individual they believed they had deciphered is utterly unlike the force you've become. You weren't striving for visibility, you were pursuing wholeness, and now that you've attained it, the room cannot ignore it. They devoted excessive energy to rehearsing the personas they imagined themselves to be, while you were becoming the person you were always meant to be. That's why the very atmosphere vibrates differently when you speak now. You're no longer adhering to their narrative. You are the narrative. Number 3, the spotlight is seeking you because you're the sole individual who wasn't chasing it. The spotlight is seeking you because you're the sole individual who wasn't chasing it. While others were relentlessly striving for visibility, vying for attention, and contorting themselves to fit within the confines of the limelight, you were engaged in a distinctly different endeavor. You were cultivating a self worthy of recognition. You weren't clamoring for center stage. You weren't performing for fleeting accolades. You were constructing something enduring in the shadows. Even when there was no applause, no online affirmation, no audience, that's what distinguishes you. You didn't require external validation to affirm your worth. You intrinsically understood your value even when it went unacknowledged. And that's precisely why the spotlight is now drawn to you, because you embody something that cannot be manufactured: depth, wisdom, and presence. Not superficial charm, not ephemeral viral trends, not vacuous confidence masquerading as talent, but a profound soul presence that commands attention without soliciting it. People were exerting maximum effort to maintain visibility. You were dedicating yourself to remaining authentic. While others treated life as a stage for exhibition, you regarded it as a sacred journey. You allowed the arduous seasons to mold you. You didn't recoil from your quiet years. You embraced them. You didn't broadcast every maneuver. You refined your character in solitude, and now the spotlight is circling not to gratify your ego, but because there's finally someone substantive enough to withstand its glare without being consumed by it. This is what's generating consternation. They're surveying the landscape in bewilderment because you didn't exploit anyone to ascend. You didn't compromise your values to rise. You didn't implore for followers or morph yourself into a passing fad. And yet you're the one everyone is scrutinizing now. You're the one shifting the very atmosphere. You're the one they can't cease discussing, even begrudgingly. The irony is that those who once disregarded you are now perplexed by how you garnered such attention without actively seeking it. But they'll never comprehend it because they were preoccupied with pursuing fleeting noise while you were aligning with your authentic calling. You didn't force the moment, you embodied it. And now the spotlight isn't exposing your vulnerabilities. It's unveiling what has been concealed all along. The true star wasn't absent. You were simply undergoing a period of essential refinement. Number 4, their performances were exaggerated. You were the most genuine element on set. Their performances were exaggerated. You were the most genuine element on set. That is why the entire atmosphere shifts when you arrive. You felt no need to project a false image. You felt no need to perform for validation. While they were diligently memorizing lines and donning masks, you presented yourself authentically, unfiltered, unpretentious, simply truthful. That is what distinguished you. That is what caused people to pause and reflect. You weren't attempting to impress anyone. You were simply being. And that unwavering presence resonated more powerfully than any meticulously crafted performance ever could. They embellished their narratives. They imitated confidence. They studied manipulation as if it were a legitimate skill, but it was always devoid of genuine substance. Their roles were flamboyant. Yours was resolute. They generated noise. You exuded gravitas. The irony resides in the fact that while they endeavored to shine through artifice, your inherent authenticity caused them to fade into insignificance. You didn't need to engage in competition. You simply had to stand your ground, because when authenticity enters the room, everything artificial begins to appear ludicrous. People are often perplexed by an individual who desires nothing more than to be themselves. They persistently sought to decipher your ulterior motives, but there were no hidden agendas, no elaborate schemes, no contrived personas to assume, and that is why they consistently misinterpreted you. You weren't acting, you were living. You weren't performing, you were embodying. That instilled a profound sense of unease, because you weren't someone they could easily predict, manipulate, or confine. The essence you possess cannot be replicated. It cannot be packaged for consumption. It cannot be rehearsed for effect. That is why you create such a lasting impression without conscious effort. They expended their energy perfecting their outward image. You devoted your time to cultivating wholeness. That is the currency that now possesses the greatest value. Not flawless execution, not widespread popularity, but genuine presence. And that is what you introduce into every environment. They exerted maximum effort to attract attention. You prioritized authenticity above all else, and now the entire production is undergoing a transformation because of it, because the world is jaded by performances weary of the act. And when the spotlight illuminates someone genuine, it doesn't merely illuminate them. It exposes the artifice of everyone else. You didn't usurp the spotlight. The entire construct crumbled under the weight of its own falseness. You simply stood your ground and everything else failed to withstand the force of truth. Number 5, every time they attempted to replace you, the scene felt hollow. Every time they attempted to replace you, the scene felt hollow. They introduced substitute stand-ins, even boisterous personalities that superficially resembled you. But regardless of their efforts to replicate your essence, it never truly resonated. It never felt authentic because what you embody cannot be imitated. It transcends physical appearance, stylistic choices, or vocal inflections. It's your intrinsic essence, that elusive quality that cannot be bottled, fabricated, or coerced, and the moment it was absent, the entire atmosphere felt discordant. They believed that anyone could perform your role, that by inserting a louder, flashier, more agreeable replacement, no one would perceive the difference. But the ensuing silence revealed the truth. The dialogues became vapid. The momentum dissipated. The elusive sparkle they were pursuing vanished, because it was never about merely occupying a void. It was about the intrinsic presence that imbued the space with significance in the first place. And that was invariably you. You were the soul of the scene, the spark they undervalued, the implicit adhesive that bound the dynamic together. They initially failed to recognize this. They were preoccupied with moving forward, rebranding or rewriting the past. But each attempt to supplant you only served to underscore the irrefutable fact that you were never meant to be replaceable. It wasn't about talent. They located individuals with skills. It wasn't about physical appearance. They found individuals with appealing images. It wasn't even about personality. They found individuals who could charm, but it remained ineffective because you didn't merely show up. You brought an authentic essence. You exuded gravitas. You anchored the space. You altered the atmosphere simply by inhabiting it. Now they are left with mere fillers, with meaningless noise, with actions devoid of substance. The scene persists, but the enchantment is gone. People may not always be capable of articulating it precisely, but they can intuitively sense it. And what they are currently experiencing is a void, not of a mere role, but of a spirit. A unique frequency, a truth they failed to appreciate when they possessed it. You didn't need to compete for a place. You were the place, and the resounding failure of everything without you serves as the ultimate confirmation. Number 6. Your silence wasn't a calculated tactic, it was an exercise in divine timing. Your silence wasn't a calculated tactic, it was an exercise in divine timing. People surmised that you had vanished because you were lost. They presumed that you had fallen silent because you lacked anything to contribute. But what they failed to discern is that you weren't concealing yourself. You were being shielded. You weren't evading the spotlight. The spotlight wasn't yet prepared for you, and frankly, neither were they, because the essence you carried required cultivation, not distraction. You weren't deliberately lying low to generate suspense. You were enduring seasons that would have shattered others. You were traversing trials that didn't merely inflict pain, they purified. While they were engaging in ostentatious displays, you were undergoing a process of profound stripping away. While they were performing for the approval of the masses, you were in the background diligently relearning how to hear your inner voice. Every instance of betrayal, every period of delay, every door that was resolutely closed wasn't a form of punishment. It was a meticulous preparation. It was Providence pressing pause, ensuring that you wouldn't prematurely unveil your gifts to individuals who only valued superficiality. They asserted that you were too withdrawn, that you had disappeared, that you had allowed your moment to pass, but the truth is you weren't pursuing a fleeting moment. You were striving for the defining moment, the one that was aligned, irrefutable, and unwavering. And that caliber of moment doesn't stem from frantic exertion or forced attempts. It originates from being fully prepared, not simply ready for public display, but ready to be utilized, ready to articulate with a power that doesn't merely reverberate but genuinely transforms. Now everything you have endured, the prolonged periods of silence, the agonizing pain, the countless nights when it felt as though no one acknowledged you, is culminating in a full circle, because when you now speak, it won't be inconsequential chatter. It won't be a contrived performance. It will be an amalgamation of conviction, clarity, and authentic calling, all coalescing into a unified voice. People won't simply hear you, they'll experience you viscerally. They'll cease scrolling. They'll sit upright. They'll lean in attentively, not because you're strident, but because you're genuine. Your silence wasn't a manifestation of weakness. It wasn't born of fear. It was an act of unwavering obedience. You didn't simply go missing. You were undergoing a profound marking, and now when you articulate your thoughts, they carry an inherent weight that cannot be artificially manufactured, because what emanates from a soul that has been forged in the crucible of adversity doesn't merely entertain, it awakens. Number 7, you radiate a presence that restructures the very fabric of the room. You radiate a presence that restructures the very fabric of the room. You don't merely enter spaces. You fundamentally alter them. Something transformative occurs the moment you arrive. People take notice. They may not possess the ability to articulate it precisely, but they intuitively sense it. The energetic equilibrium shifts. The atmosphere recalibrates itself. It isn't contingent on your volume level. It isn't dependent on your attire or your pronouncements. It is simply the embodiment of who you are. You carry a unique frequency that makes everything inauthentic begin to feel deeply uncomfortable. Individuals who were at ease suddenly become vigilant. Those who are operating under false pretenses begin to falter. Artificially constructed confidence starts to fracture. It isn't because you are attempting to dominate. You are simply present, fully present. And in a world saturated with individuals navigating life through deception, that level of authenticity is both rare and disruptive. You don't introduce drama. You don't simply offer a superficial piece to appease others. You introduce truth, and truth will invariably rearrange whatever is predicated on falsehoods. Some individuals sit up straighter when you enter. They become more respectful. They modify their manner of speaking. Others become more defensive. They evade direct eye contact. They become apprehensive or irritated. That is not your responsibility. That is merely their alignment being exposed. Your presence triggers reactions not because you are in the wrong, but because you are grounded in truth, and truth compels everything else to undergo a process of reevaluation. You may not even be consciously aware of it. You simply move with your inherent grace. You speak when the situation necessitates it. You remain silent when reverence dictates, but everywhere you venture, a subtle adjustment occurs. It is a spiritual phenomenon. It is an energetic force. You didn't train to acquire this attribute. You were divinely called to embody it, and because of that, you cannot simply deactivate it. You don't actively seek to overshadow others. You become the focal point of attention without conscious intent. This is not about ego. It is about essence. You are not attempting to manipulate the room. You are simply showing up in complete alignment with your authentic self. And that single act causes everything that is artificial, shallow, or precarious to either ascend or recede. Your presence does not demand attention. It commands respect, and wherever you journey, rooms will continue to undergo transformation, because that is the inevitable consequence when truth makes its entrance. Number 8, your character was forged in the fires they only feigned enduring. Your character was forged in the fires they only feigned enduring. Numerous individuals speak as though they have weathered the most arduous trials. They liberally use phrases like, "I've witnessed things," and "Sardana, I've overcome so much." But for the majority, it is merely empty rhetoric, rehearsed expressions of pain. Hollow slogans intended to project an image of strength. But your scars are not mere decorations. They are indelible chapters of your story. They carry a profound weight, and that weight manifests in your movements, your speech, and your innate ability to discern the true nature of individuals without conscious effort. You didn't simply navigate challenging circumstances. You were stripped down to your very essence. Life divested you of everything extraneous, the deceptive illusions, the superficial support, the fabricated identity. You weren't simply disappointed, you were utterly crushed, abandoned during your times of greatest need, betrayed by the very individuals to whom you had dedicated your best efforts. You didn't merely lose monetary assets or valuable time. You relinquished pieces of your very being, and yet you persevered, not because you felt equipped to do so, but because you had no viable alternative. You were silenced, dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated, but none of it was squandered. That crucible of adversity didn't simply inflict damage, it forged resilience. It cauterized your inherent fears. It burned away the part of you that craved external validation. It burned away the aspect of your being that tolerated disrespect and betrayal, and what emerged on the other side is someone unwavering, Not demonstrative, not ostentatious, but resolute, grounded, and profoundly deep. Now individuals are drawn to you often without understanding the underlying reasons. It isn't your personal style. It isn't your vocal inflection. It is the inherent substance, the intricate layers. The survival ingrained in your silences, the clarity that radiates from your presence, the caliber of depth that can only originate from genuine suffering and profound healing. And that is what sets you apart. They attempt to replicate your inner radiance, but they haven't traversed your crucible. They mimic your external strength, but they haven't weathered your internal storms. You don't need to convince anyone. Your very existence serves as irrefutable proof. You embody the kind of truth that exposes every shallow performance around you, and those who merely pretended to be strong often falter the moment life presents genuine challenges. But you have already endured the worst. You are living testament to resilience. That is why you exhibit unwavering composure. That is why your steps carry a palpable weight, because they were carved through the depths of despair, and you emerged transformed and sanctified. Number 9, you weren't seeking visibility. You were evolving into something worthy of recognition. You weren't seeking visibility. You were evolving into something worthy of recognition. That is the aspect they consistently failed to grasp. While everyone else was engrossed in showcasing themselves, meticulously polishing their outward image, and crafting a version of success that appeared superficially appealing. You were engaged in the invisible work, the type that garners no applause, the type that doesn't trend on social media. You weren't desperately seeking immediate attention. You were learning how to bear the weight of responsibility, how to achieve wholeness without the validation of an audience. They were pursuing external accolades. You were pursuing internal alignment. They coveted throngs of followers. You desired profound depth. They were fixated on being seen. You were focused on achieving clarity of self first, because you understood that if you bypassed that essential step, the one that necessitated unlearning, unpacking, and unraveling whatever you subsequently constructed, would be ephemeral. You didn't aspire to be superficially impressive. You aspired to be authentically true. You didn't desire to present a facade of success while feeling internally hollow. You desired to embody purpose, power, and inner peace. That is why now, when individuals encounter you, a distinctly different response is elicited. They don't simply notice your presence. They intuitively feel it. They don't merely admire your accomplishments. They deeply respect what you were required to become to arrive at this juncture, because it is unequivocally clear that you didn't seek shortcuts. You didn't take the path of least resistance. You didn't evade the struggle. You allowed life to sculpt you. You allowed the process to humble you. You allowed pain to impart its invaluable lessons, and that type of transformative journey engenders a presence that cannot be imitated. You weren't adorning yourself for public display. You were cultivating yourself for your ultimate destiny. And now individuals are beginning to recognize that. Some are rendered speechless. Some are shaken to their core. Some are even triggered because your very existence challenges the prevailing culture of superficiality. You achieved inner solidity while they were still engaged in a mere charade. You became genuine in a world that is increasingly addicted to artificial filters, and now that you have stepped forward, it isn't just your time, it's your ordained turn. They won't simply glance in your direction. They will pause and take notice. They will question how they overlooked you, and the underlying answer will invariably remain the same. You weren't concealing yourself. You were undergoing a profound transformation, and now that you have arrived, the incessant noise begins to subside because something profoundly worthwhile has finally made its entrance. Number 10. They believed you had missed your moment, unaware that you were the moment. They believed you had missed your moment. They scrutinized your delay, your periods of silence, your deliberate progress, and assumed that your opportunities had passed. They asserted that you should have voiced your opinion sooner. They claimed that your window of opportunity had closed. They surmised that the spotlight had shifted elsewhere. But what they failed to comprehend is that you were never intended to conform to someone else's arbitrary timeline. You were never designed to arrive precisely on cue. You are the cue itself. You are the fundamental shift that others have been subconsciously awaiting without even fully realizing it. You weren't delayed. You weren't veering off course. You were simply aligned with a distinct rhythm, a divinely ordained one, a sacred one, one that is not impelled by fear or coerced by external pressure. And now that you have unequivocally arrived, everything else is undergoing a process of recalibration. The prevailing energy is shifting. The established dynamics are rearranging themselves because you didn't arrive to merely blend in. You arrived to reset the very tone of the environment. You weren't created to simply match the tempo of the external world. You were created to set it. That is why things intrinsically feel different when you articulate your thoughts now. That is why opportunities are materializing that were once resolutely denied to you. That is why individuals who previously ignored you are now pausing mid-sentence when your name is invoked, because they are beginning to recognize that the defining moment was inherently incomplete without your presence. You don't need to provide explanations for your absence. You don't need to defend your periods of delay. The true power resides in the fact that you present yourself with readiness, not haste, with thorough preparation, not with anxiety, with inner solidity, not with fragmentation. You didn't forfeit the opportunity. You are the opportunity. And that profound truth is resonating deeply, especially with those who assumed that your time had passed. Now the spotlight isn't simply locating you. It is settling upon you not because you vehemently vied for it, but because you embody something that can no longer be disregarded. This isn't about retribution or vindication. It is about divine alignment. This is about your inherent purpose finally intersecting with your authentic presence. You didn't miss your destined moment. The moment was patiently awaiting you, and now that you have arrived, everything finally makes intuitive sense. Number 11, they gave you the wrong script and you still outperformed them. So to wrap it all up, remember this. Your journey with all its twists and turns wasn't a delay, but a divine setup. You weren't late. You were being meticulously prepared for the role only you can play. You are the narrative curveball, the orchestrator, the one whose authenticity shines brighter than any manufactured spotlight. You weren't chasing visibility, you were evolving into something truly worthy of recognition. I hope this message resonates with you, reminds you of your inherent power, and encourages you to step into your ascendance with confidence and grace. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below, sharing your own experiences, ask any questions that came up, or just join the conversation. And if this message resonated with you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future insights and inspiration. Let's continue this journey together. Journey together. Journey together. Journey together. Journey together.